The ancient hull of the legendary human Dreadnought Invictus, scarred from 1,000 battles, drifted silently through the endless void as the Illyrian exploration vessel, Quasar's Whisper, approached to plunder the secrets locked within the derelict's armored shell. Captain Vola gripped the railing on the bridge of the sleek Quasar's Whisper. His large black eyes reflected the ghostly silhouette of the Dreadnought growing larger on the viewscreen. Vola's scaled green skin crinkled as his lipless mouth curled into a determined line. The greatest discovery of his career, a ship from the war that nearly destroyed his people centuries ago, floated before him. Vola glanced over at his trusted Lieutenant Zek. The grizzled veteran's red skin was crisscrossed with old plasma burns, mementos of his dozens of tours patrolling the neutral zone during rising tensions with the humans. Beside Zek, idealistic Taro practically bounced with excitement, his youthful blue scales still vibrant and unscarred. Vola raised a clawed fist. "Bring us alongside the Dreadnought. Taro, prepare an umbilical. Let's see what nuggets of human history we can dig out of that armored shell." Taro nodded eagerly, but Zek's yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the readouts on his console. "Sir, some unusual readings coming from—" "Later," Vola snapped. "The only readings I care about are the ones we take from inside that ship. Now get that umbilical ready. We're going to board her." But as the Quasar's Whisper glided closer to the Invictus, unseen scanners tracked their approach. Aboard the stealthed human vessel Shadowhawk hovering nearby, Commander Gerald Crawford sat motionless, watching a live feed of the Illyrian ship on a glowing monitor. Crawford rubbed a hand across his bald liver-spotted head, cybernetic implants glinting from his eye sockets. The Council had been clear. The Illyrians must never learn the truth about the Invictus, the forbidden human weapons it carried in its shattered hold. The ones that broke the enemy's lines and won the war had to remain hidden, at all costs. The old spy allowed himself a grim smile. This was what he had trained for his entire life. No matter how capable Vola and his team might be, Crawford would shadow them every step of the way as they explored the Invictus. And the instant they discovered something they shouldn't, he would bury those secrets, along with the bodies of every Illyrian aboard. As the umbilical connected Quasar's Whisper to the derelict Invictus with a metallic clang, Vola, Taro, and Zek stepped cautiously through the airlock. The once mighty warship was shrouded in unnatural stillness, the air heavy with centuries of disuse. Shadows danced along the walls as weak emergency lights sputtered. Taro lifted his handheld scanner, the device casting an eerie green glow across his youthful face as he swept it back and forth, mapping their route deeper into the ship. Zek's hand hovered near his holstered sidearm, yellow eyes darting from shadow to shadow, alert for any sign of danger. But Vola's mind was elsewhere, pondering the implications of their discovery. The Invictus held secrets that could reshape Illyrian understanding of the war, and perhaps even their place in the galaxy. They walked down debris-strewn corridors, following the faint energy readings deeper into the ship's bowels. The readings intensified as they neared a sealed blast door, still intact after untold centuries. Vola ran his hand along its armored surface, imagining the horrors it might have witnessed. He nodded to Taro. The young engineer knelt by the door's control panel and pried it open, setting to work on the ancient locking mechanism. Unknown to the Illyrians, they were not alone. Crawford and his team crept through the ventilation shafts above, tracking the aliens' every move, listening to every word. As Taro worked frantically to open the blast door, Crawford silently positioned his men on either side of the corridor, rifles aimed and ready. With a hiss of escaping air, the blast door slid open. Vola stepped forward, peering into the chamber beyond. And then all hell broke loose. Crawford's team dropped from the ceiling, weapons blazing. Plasma bolts filled the air. Zek roared in surprise and reached for his gun, but a human was faster. Plasma scorched the bulkhead inches from the veteran's head. "Stand down, Illyrians!" Crawford snarled, his rifle unwavering as he aimed it at Vola's chest. "This is a restricted area." Vola raised his hands slowly, mind racing. Perhaps diplomacy could still salvage this. "We didn't know this was Federation property," he said, keeping his voice level. "We're just explorers. Surely we can reach an understanding." Crawford stepped forward until the barrel of his gun pressed against Vola's chest. "No, Illyrian, we can't. The Invictus's secrets aren't for you. Surrender or die." Vola met Crawford's gaze, searching for any shred of compromise in those cybernetic eyes. He saw none. The human would kill them all before letting them leave with whatever the ship held. The two leaders stared each other down, neither blinking, neither yielding, as the forgotten warship shuddered around them. And then the chamber beyond the blast doors began to glow, ancient lights flickering to life, to reveal something that made both Illyrian and human gasp. A towering core of alien machinery dominated the room, pulsing with an inner light, radiating power beyond imagining. The secret of the Invictus, the prize each sought to claim or destroy, now stood revealed. The core pulsed with blinding light, tendrils of energy dancing across its surface. But what had been an ethereal glow moments before turned violent, triggering the Invictus's long-dormant security protocols. Vola and Crawford, their standoff forgotten, dove behind the nearest consoles as hidden turrets unleashed a storm of plasma. Bolts scarred ancient metal, filling the air with the stench of ozone and scorched circuitry. Taro scrambled for his scanner, desperate to find an access point to shut down the defenses. Beside him, Zek unslung his rifle, his grizzled face set with purpose. The Illyrian veteran popped up from cover, dropping to one knee and firing in one smooth motion. His plasma bolt struck home, reducing an automated turret to slag. Across the chamber, Crawford barked orders. "Lynn, work with the Illyrian engineer. We'll cover you." He punctuated his command with a burst from his own rifle, forcing a drone to seek shelter. Grudgingly, Lynn darted to Taro's position, the two technicians huddling over the scanner's readout. Vola, crouched behind a sparking console, met Crawford's gaze. Eons of distrust stretched between them, but the captain saw the hard truth in the human's eyes. They were trapped, outmatched. Cooperation, however fleeting, was their only path to survival. "A truce, then," Vola shouted over the chaos, "until we escape this death trap." Crawford, his face grim, nodded sharply. "Agreed, we fight together for now." They broke cover as one, plasma rifles spitting fire, carving a path deeper into the ship. Zek took point, his uncanny marksmanship clearing the way, but for every drone they destroyed, every turret they silenced, two more rose to take their place. An ominous rumble shook the deck plates. A hulking Guardian bot, all flashing blades and searing lasers, emerged from the shadows. It fixed on the intruders with merciless purpose. Vola and Crawford poured plasma into the machine, their bolts splashing harmlessly against its reinforced chassis. The bot surged forward, unstoppable, its blades hungering for blood. Zek stepped into its path. With a roar that shook the bulkheads, he charged, drawing the machine's fire. Plasma seared his flesh, but he didn't falter. One shot, two, three. He poured into the bot's optics. On the fourth, the robot staggered, its sensors shattered. Zek seized his chance. He leaped, bearing the machine to the ground. His rifle, depleted, fell from his grasp. But the old warrior never hesitated. With a howl of pure defiance, he drove his armored fist into the bot's sparking innards, again and again, until the beast fell still. But the victory had cost him. Zek slumped over the bot's ruined form, his body ravaged by plasma, his life flickering like a dying ember. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm them, Taro and Lynn cried out in unison, "We did it!" The turrets fell silent, the drones collapsed. An eerie stillness settled over the Invictus, broken only by the labored breathing of the survivors and the soft, steady pulse of the core. Vola and Crawford, battered and bloody, approached the Enigma, transfixed. A holoprojector flared to life above it, and a human woman's face snapped into focus. Her eyes, haunted and resolute, seemed to stare into their very souls. "If you are seeing this," her voice echoed through the chamber, "then the unthinkable has happened. The Invictus has fallen, and our mission has failed." She spoke of the core, of its terrible power and the responsibility that came with it. Destroy it or harness it, the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. As her final words faded, Vola and Crawford locked gazes, the weight of the choice before them heavier than any burden they had ever borne. In that moment, the bitter enemies realized the truth. The future, for better or worse, would be shaped by the choice they made here, together, standing in the heart of a fallen legend with the power to reshape the stars in their hands. Vola and Crawford stood frozen, the weight of the choice before them threatening to crush their very souls. Crawford, his cybernetic eyes flashing, turned to Vola. "The core must be destroyed. We cannot let its power fall into the wrong hands, especially not yours." Vola bristled, his scales rippling with anger. "You would destroy our only chance at peace. This core could be the key to ending centuries of bloodshed between our peoples." Their voices rose, echoing through the chamber as they argued, neither willing to yield. Taro's shout cut through the din like a plasma bolt. "The core! It's destabilizing!" The ship shuddered, ancient girders groaning as if in pain. Vola and Crawford exchanged a look, their dispute forgotten in the face of this new crisis. "We have to get out of here," Crawford growled. They sprinted for the exit, debris raining down around them. Taro's fingers flew over his scanner, desperately trying to stabilize the core. A massive beam crashed down, blocking their path. Crawford shoved Vola aside, the metal missing the Illyrian by inches. A grudging nod of thanks passed between them. They reached the airlock, piling inside. Just as the doors sealed, a deafening explosion rocked the Invictus. Taro cried out in triumph and despair. "I ejected the core, but the ship—" From the viewport, they watched the core tumble away into space. It pulsed once, twice, and then detonated. Light seared their eyes, the shockwave buffeting their ships like leaves in a storm. As the glare faded, Vola and Crawford faced each other through the glass, their ships drifting side by side. Silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future. Vola pressed a button, his voice crackling over the comm. "We have a chance here, Crawford, to end the fighting, to build something better." Crawford hesitated, centuries of distrust warring with the undeniable truth of Vola's words. Slowly, deliberately, he reached out to clasp Vola's extended hand. The two leaders stood there, human and Illyrian enemies no more, a fragile piece born in the heart of a shattered legend. But even as they dared to hope, the spectre of the Invictus loomed over them. The secrets it still held, the mysterious woman who had orchestrated their fates. Their paths were intertwined now, for better or worse, and something told them their journey was far from over. The Invictus's destruction sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Vola and Crawford, their grudging truce still holding, returned to their respective homeworlds as heroes, but the scars of their ordeal ran deep. On the Illyrian homeworld, Vola stood before the High Council. His report on the Invictus met with a mix of awe and trepidation. The implications of the core's power and the mysterious woman's warning weighed heavily on the assembled leaders. "This alliance with the humans," one councillor hissed, his scales flashing with anger. "It is a mistake. They cannot be trusted." Vola slammed his fist on the podium, silencing the murmurs. "The mistake," he growled, "would be to ignore the threat that looms over us all. The entity imprisoned within that core is our true enemy. We must focus on that." But even as Vola fought for unity, he couldn't shake the feeling that the woman's message held a deeper meaning. Late that night, sequestered in his quarters, Vola pored over ancient Illyrian texts, searching for any mention of the entity or the long-dead civilization that had imprisoned it. A passage caught his eye, a fragment of a legend about a world consumed by darkness. The coordinates were incomplete, but it was a start. Vola knew what he had to do. On Earth, Crawford faced a different kind of battle. The Invictus loss had sent shockwaves through the Federation hierarchy, and the old soldier found himself caught in a web of political machinations. In a dimly lit room, Crawford faced down a shadowy figure, a high-ranking official whose name he dared not speak. "The Invictus was a Federation's secret," the man said, his voice cold. "Its destruction has set our plans back decades." Crawford stood firm, his cybernetic eyes flashing. Your plans, perhaps, but I serve the Federation, not your personal ambitions. The man leaned forward, his face split by a predatory grin. Ambition is what drives the Federation, Crawford, and I'd advise you to remember where your loyalties lie. But even as he navigated the treacherous waters of Earth politics, Crawford couldn't forget the horror he'd seen on the Invictus. The entity was a threat beyond anything they'd faced before, and he knew the Federation's leaders were blind to the danger. He had to act, even if it meant sacrificing everything he'd fought for. In the dead of night, Crawford gathered a small, trusted team and commandeered a ship, setting course for the one place he thought might hold the answers they sought. The ruins of a long-dead civilization, a world whose name was spoken only in whispers. Volar's ship dropped out of hyperspace, the dead world looming before him like a shadow. The ruins rose from the planet's surface like the bones of some great beast, ancient and foreboding. As Volar picked his way through the crumbling structures, a sense of unease crept over him. The carvings on the walls told a story of darkness and despair, of an entity that had consumed this world from within. And then he saw it, etched into the stone, a warning, a desperate plea from a long-dead people. The core was not a power source, but a prison, and the entity within was a force of pure malevolence. But before Volar could process this revelation, a familiar ship descended from the sky. Crawford, his face grim, emerged from the airlock, a team of heavily armed soldiers at his back. "I had hoped I was wrong," Crawford said, his voice heavy, "but it seems our paths were destined to cross again." Volar straightened, meeting the human's gaze. "The entity," he said, "we cannot let it fall into the wrong hands." Crawford nodded, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "Agreed, but I fear that may already be too late." As if on cue, a third ship appeared on the horizon, sleek and predatory. It bore the markings of the Federation, but something about it felt wrong, twisted. The conspirators had come for the entity, and they would stop at nothing to claim its power. Volar and Crawford stood side by side as the first shots rang out, their uneasy alliance forged anew in the heat of battle. On a desolate moon, the final confrontation played out. The conspirators had built a facility to house and study the entity, a monstrosity of steel and shadow that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. Volar and Crawford fought their way through the halls, their skills honed by a lifetime of warfare. They were a force to be reckoned with, Illyrian and human, united against a common foe. In the heart of the facility, they found the entity, a swirling mass of darkness that seemed to consume the very light around it. The conspirators, led by the shadowy figure from Earth, stood before it, their faces twisted with a mad glee. "You're too late," the leader crowed. "With this power, the Federation will be unstoppable." But Volar and Crawford would not yield. They fought with a fury born of desperation, their weapons blazing, their resolve unbreakable. In the end, it was Taro who made the ultimate sacrifice. The young Illyrian, seeing an opening, hurled himself at the entity, a makeshift device clutched in his hand. The explosion rocked the facility, the entity screaming as it was banished back to its prison. But Taro was gone, consumed by the very device that had saved them all. In the aftermath, Volar and Crawford stood amidst the rubble, their hearts heavy with loss. They had won the day, but at a terrible cost. "It's not over," Volar said, his voice raw. "The entity will return." Crawford nodded, his face etched with grim determination. "Then we'll be ready. We'll find a way to destroy it once and for all." They clasped hands, Illyrian and human, bound by a shared purpose and a loss that cut to the very soul. They parted ways, Volar to his people, Crawford to face the consequences of his actions. But they knew their paths would cross again. The secrets of the Invictus would not rest, and the fight for the galaxy's future had only just begun. Volar and Crawford stood atop a wind-swept cliff, the stars stretching out above them like an endless sea. The weight of the battles they'd fought, the losses they'd endured, hung heavy on their shoulders. But there was a fire in their eyes, a determination that burned brighter than any star. They had seen the darkness that lurked at the edges of the galaxy, the entity that threatened to consume all in its path. And they had made a pact, a promise forged in blood and sacrifice. They would not rest until the entity was destroyed, until the galaxy was safe from its malevolent grasp. The future stretched out before them, uncertain and fraught with peril. But they would face it together, Illyrian and human, bound by a shared purpose that transcended species and allegiance. For in the end, they were more than just allies or friends. They were warriors, guardians of the light against the encroaching darkness, and they would fight side by side until the very end. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.